Are we ready? Okay, I'm gonna call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. Okay, attendance. We are all here except Supervisor Milliken, who hopefully will be here shortly. This meeting notice was posted properly by the county clerk's office. And let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Oh,
Okay, Supervisor Conrath, second Supervisor Toma. Any questions on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and it carries unanimously. All right, so the first discussion item is the Sheriff's Department quarterly report. So Sheriff Schultz.
Good morning, all.
Morning.
Morning.
Your Christmas.
Yes, same to you. So since the agenda packet came out, there's actually been quite a few updates to several of the initiatives in the packet, the US packet that you got. The first one was is the Next Generation 911. If you recall, we went through this committee to designate the Washington County PSAP, the dispatch center, as eligible for the state grant in the amount of, I think it was about 377,000 total. So just a couple of days ago, we were awarded that grant. It's an 80-20 split, so it came up to about 270,000 that we were officially awarded just this week. We tried to turn around. I signed the grant memorandum of understanding. I believe we're sending either half or will be sent back to the state very quickly. We wanted to do that quickly to get on top of the list to have the work done. So hopefully that quick turnaround time will we'll have the work start pretty quickly, or at least get on the list to have it worked or started. The other is another initiative is the radio system. That is, although it's like a long project, and it is on track. We're in negotiations now with Raycom, Harris, and our radio vendors to work on the contract for phases 3 and 4. In fact, the captain is just reviewing one of the I don't want to say the final contract, but the working draft of the contract, so that we're still on track for. Body cameras, there's also been some developments in there. As of the status of this was that we applied for that grant. I'm sorry, this was a $377,000 one. I misspoke. So we were awarded that grant. As you know, we were in the phases of evaluating the different vendors. We chose a vendor, Axon. We went through the procurement process for that to cross all of our T's and dot our I's. And we actually took delivery of the body camera, the actual hardware I think it was last week. So we still are on track, hopefully, with the implementation date of maybe the late first quarter of next year, March of 23 in that neighborhood.
question about the body cameras.
Yeah.
You touched on the physical aspect of it, but what about the policies and procedures internally? Do you have completed, or are you still working on,
We're still working on it. Luckily, quite honestly, we're not reinventing the wheel. Virtually every agency in Washington County has them already, so we're stealing a lot of theirs.
Making it better, obviously, but
right, yes. Yeah. One of the major policy decisions that we have to make is for the redaction, what we redact in cameras and footage rather, and that will quite honestly affect our workload considerably. There are some agencies that Fond du Lac, for instance, if you're in a private residence, they just don't release it, period. It's everything. It's all in a public venue. There's some advantages to that for our procedurally, workload, obviously, transparency. I'm not so sure, but there are the
Right.
final I took the approach of, there's some significant privacy concerns if you're filming inside somebody's living room that doesn't get released. So I think there's some policy decisions that have to be made, but there's a lot of the overall frameworks already in place.
Is that a policy that you make that decision on, or will that be an agenda item at this committee?
It could probably be, I'd probably consult a lot with our county attorney first, but it could certainly be a policy discussion that we have here.
Okay.
But ultimately, I'll be very honest, it's my decision. The next initiative is, this is kind of a new one. It's maximizing patrol resources by reallocation. And this was kind of a difficult decision for us. We had to make this kind of in the last quarter of this year. We realized with all the staffing studies that we did, that our patrol, I have some serious patrol concerns with our staffing out on the road. So what we did is we really looked internally of what we could do to put the most deputies out on patrol. And we don't have a whole lot of meat on the bone but there were two particular positions that were not solely dedicated to patrol. One was a safety resource officer. It's a deputy that does a lot of school safety assessments and business assessments, which is very, very important. There's no doubt about it. But it was a dedicated position. And we transferred that over to a rotating patrol, which rotates through the weekends rather than a Monday through Friday position. He still does some of that stuff. It's just not a dedicated position. So if there are school safety issues that come up, he's still our department expert on it, but it's just not a dedicated position. The other one is our DARE position. I decided that although that program is very, very important. I appreciate the having deputies in schools and the DARE program in general. But the problem is that it's a dedicated full-time position Monday through Friday. And we really, really struggled with the calls for service and our manpower on the weekends. So we transitioned, we discontinued the DARE program for next year. And we transferred it to a rotating schedule, so they work weekends. Kind of, like I said, kind of a difficult policy decision. But we really needed the manpower as much as we could on the road.
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
I got some phone calls and emails on that.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, absolutely.
And the community, is pleased with that decision and wondering how it occurred and wondering how it occurred too. I'm newer to public safety, why, that type of decision didn't come, through public safety or be presented here first before it was made public.
I believe, I don't want to speak, but I believe this is the fiscal kind of oversight of my operations, not the operational. And a lot of those decisions I make. And I had to, from my perspective, I needed to put, like I said, as my deputies out on the road.
Okay, I'll share that response. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think I've met with school administrators,
Yeah.
A couple of principals from schools, the district superintendent from Germantown. And I explained to them, I see tremendous value in the program. If you don't know, we have one full-time, it's Deputy Mijas. He does a phenomenal job with it. He's an asset to that area. But it's really just a matter of prioritizing our services and what's mandated, what's not.
And I think there's also another aspect that it may be redundant with some of the other programming in the community. I believe Elevate and the Heroin Task Force do a lot of programming that's similar. And they tend to look back at some evidence-based processes that they use in their training. So
But that
Yeah.
doesn't hit that school population with the children.
I believe they do. So, because I know we talked about this a couple of years at the county board level, and there was some talk at that time about discontinuing the DARE program too, and that was one of the talking points. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
or- Yeah,
There was a point the previous sheriff suspended it for the spring term or fall term when we had some manpower issues. But it just it got to the point where we just really need the help on the road. Chairman Schleif, did you have something?
I'm just curious, say Germantown, for instance, do they have a municipal officer that serves in that capacity a little bit or not?
So Germantown is one of the oddities in the county where school, so they have schools in the village and then schools in the townships and the village of Germantown, the village of Richfield and the town of Germantown. So the superintendent for Germantown was just concerned about the consistency of the curriculum within the district. So they actually pay for up to at least a portion of a position for the police department as a school resource officer. So they're making an agreement with Germantown to actually provide their instruction in the schools out in the village of Richfield and the town of Germantown, which I certainly don't object to.
But Hartford and say Slinger,
Most of their school, all the Hartford schools are in the city of Hartford. We provide some their instruction to some of the parochial schools inside villages and cities. Cabrini, for instance, in West Bend here, it's Holy Angels and Cabrini, I believe. So I gave them the option, they can always approach their local police department, see if they're willing to institute that. Like I said, it was a hard decision. It's nothing that I took lightly. It's just, I think it's something that had to be done.
And I think if I understand correctly, any municipality that had their own police department, they would go to that they were already going to that police department already for their DARE program.
If some of the police departments don't offer it,
Okay,
West Bend does not.
okay, so were we then doing West Bend?
So we were just doing some of the parochial schools in the city of West Bend.
Okay,
Another example is the village of Kewaskum. Their officer was having some medical problems, was on medical leave. So we stepped in at, I believe, 2 parochial schools, St. Lucas and Holy Trinity, I believe, that we stepped in to do it.
okay,
So I think there is tremendous value to it. There's no doubt.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, especially we're putting all this money towards the, the opioid crisis and, we have our drug court. I mean, to eliminate, a foundational DARE program to, prevent the upstream effects of all that, especially today's world and all these funds we're hopefully getting or from the whole opioid crisis. But say if a community wants, say like Slinger School District would still want the DARE program. How could they go about that? Could they say, like you said, that one school district, Germantown helps pay for it? Or say, could the school board say, you know what, we still want to partner with Washington County, will pay for it within their own funds somehow? And, could communities, schools reach out to you? Do you have a person versus the money or?
We have one full-time instructor and I think 2 part-time instructors that are certified DARE instructors. Most of the school district, I don't want to speak out of so I probably should verify that. I'm not 100% certain, but most school districts that fund, it's not, they don't fully fund it. It's maybe 60-70%. So that was going to be a fiscal decision that would be in front of you guys if the school district want to do that. It would certainly be an option.
You should stay on track too. We're not necessarily talking about their program. We're talking more about the sheriff's office maximizing the patrol resources. So if we want to come back and discuss the DARE program at a different time, we can do that.
yeah, good point, thank you.
All right.
All right, and then the last one is the plan for the modified crisis intervention team model. We certainly saw a lot of value into having a crisis intervention, a true crisis intervention team, where you have a social worker teamed up with a deputy, so we are still working with the human services to see if we can't come up with a modified program, at least to roll something out at a smaller scale than maybe we had initially broached. It could be just a one team type of thing. But we certainly think that there's still some value to that. So we're actively working with Human Services, Julie Driscoll, to see if we can't come up with something.
The due date on that is almost a year, so is that really, there wouldn't be boots on the ground for whatever form this takes until then, or is that?
So I can tell you that when we hire a new person, so it would be creating new positions or reallocating existing ones, which that might not be feasible. But a new position, we offer lateral transfers, so that impacts significantly. But if it's a brand new person we hire just out of technical college, we need to send them to recruit school. That's an 18-week commitment. And then after that, there's field training, which is 12 to 14 weeks. So realistically, if we started somebody in January at recruit school, they're not available to fill a slot until the end of August. So it's 8 months out.
But a position like this, would you put a brand new recruit in this position?
No, absolutely not. No.
Okay, because the crisis
Right.
intervention sounds like you need some
Yep.
experience.
But you have to remember that I'm pretty sure it's not the way it is, that I have to backfill that,
Okay,
figure a way to backfill it first.
if
before
there's a
we-
lateral transit,
If it was a lateral transfer, if it was a new position, we laterally transferred, then it would be much more like 2 months, 3 months.
because is there any additional training for a person to kind of get on this team? Other than just experience or tenure of being on the force and,
Yep, absolutely. So that's one of the protocols we're working with Human Services on, and we actually intend on, we just had a command meeting yesterday, where we kind of discussed this, and we'd like to try to pick out some of the veteran candidates that we have, soliciting interest in it, and actually start getting them to some of the increased trainings that Human Services recommends in preparation for it.
okay, and then also from the human services side, would they have manpower that would be needing to be cross-trained or kind of upgraded or prepared for stepping into a role like this?
What I can say is that we're relying very heavily on what Human Services is requesting from the law enforcement side. So I guess I can't really
Okay.
speak to what
They're taking more of the lead on it.
Yes,
And there might be something more for the Human Services Committee too.
yeah, we want,
Yeah.
it's, although it's under the sheriff's office personnel proposals, it's really a human services program that we're assisting them with.
Okay, thank you.
Is this one individual or? Yeah, is this one sheriff, the crisis intervention team model, will it be one sheriff just learning all this and doing that full time, or? These are multiple,
So
or how many?
the way the model was first designed was 3 teams of 2 to cover 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're not sure. That's 6 positions. That's a big ask. So we're not entirely sure that that's feasible. And so what Julie Driscoll was proposing, I think it's a good idea, is to start out much slower. Maybe see if we can develop one team and work on all the bugs first and figure out the training, the protocols, and then build upon that if it's successful. And we really think it will be.
All right, so not quite certain how it's gonna look.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And that's really the extent of the quarterly reports. Not a whole lot of updates other than that.
All right, thank you. Let's skip past the vicious dog. It looks like our attorney Brad Stern's running a little bit late. So let's skip past that and go on to the 2023 coronavirus emergency supplemental fund.
I'm going to bring up Captain Rod Sather. It's actually going to be a pretty short update. It's
Okay.
It's not what we had hoped.
Okay,
All right,
all right.
thank you.
Yep.
Morning.
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 So this was a 2020 grant where the state had gotten a lot of money. This was actually the third round. We applied for the first two rounds and we were granted them, and this was the third round. I think there was some $450,000 allocated. With a maximum payout of 25,000 per agency. The grant, we got notification of it on November 30th. It was due January 5th. So I went out and got bids and using the same witnesses that we did before. I submitted it on the 14th and was immediately advised that the process was closed because the funds were already previously given out. So that's the update.
Okay.
So I moved
The
this.
update, we're not getting anything.
No, so I moved this expeditiously as possible,
And-
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it wasn't fast enough. So,
yep,
All right.
all right.
all right.
Well,
Thank
good
you.
try. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, let's go on to medical examiners 2023 fee increase.
Morning.
Good morning.
So most of you don't know me. My name is Craig Garbage. I am acting as the interim lead investigator right now for our department. Our department head, Rob Schaefer, is in the process of completing his retirement. So I wish him well in that. So one of the things that we have to do yearly is look at our fees that we charge for current, the upcoming year. And since we did a biennial budget, for that budget process, we estimated our fees for 2023. And Mr. Schaefer had done all of that work, and that was estimated at approximately 2% for the budget process. Since it's the end of the year, we got a more accurate number, and they're looking at a 7% increase based on the CPI of the previous year. That's how our fees are calculated. So our main fees are cremation permits, death certificate signing, transport fees, and disinterment permits. And each one of those fees, again, would be increased from 7% from last year. And those fees are handed out to the funeral homes. And then based upon what happens with the decedent, those fees are charged accordingly. So I'm looking for an approval for that.
Yep. Let's have a motion to officially introduce it. I probably should have had that right from the beginning.
I'll make a motion to,
Okay, Supervisor Krebs, a second. Supervisor Conrad. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
one question on the second page of the report actually has the fee schedule, and the fee schedule says effective January 1st, 2023. So the fees listed there, are those the fees at the 2% increase, or is that the 7%?
That is the fee schedule that you have now is with the 7%.
So if we approve it, this, what we see here.
Yes,
those are the spot.
what you see there would be the new fees, correct?
That's the only question I had. So
Okay, other questions?
So these fee increases, does it any relation to your salary or just these tasks?
Just those tasks. Those tasks have been in place long before I've been here.
Mhm.
And back in 2014, a statute was created that those fees could not be increased randomly. They could only be increased by CPI the previous year.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, if seeing no other questions, all those in favor of the motion to accept these fee increases, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you.
Merry Christmas to you.
You too.
Okay, so our last item then is the vicious dog. Brad's not here. So we had a vicious dog hearing last month. And prior to that hearing, Brad and I had had a couple conversations about this. And so I'm gonna try to capsize what my understanding was. Essentially, the way the law is written with administrative hearings like that, there's a set of laws that we have to comply with for procedures, or we can opt out of those and specify our own procedures. And we had opted out, but we hadn't really specified our own procedures. So he's looking to develop some procedures for how we would run this type of hearing. Things like some rules of what can be admitted as evidence and what can't. Who can testify, that we are actually taking formal testimony. If we're gonna have a fee for doing an appeal. I had suggested we put a fee in place and that fee would be refundable if the appellant is successful. So like last month, if we had required a fee after that hearing, because we decided that that was not a vicious dog, that fee would have been returned back to him. If we had decided the other way, then the fee would have covered the costs that we incurred for the hearing. So that was one of the things I had suggested. Another thing was having a written appeal as a required. Right now, there's nothing requiring anything in writing. I had asked Mike Fody to contact the person and see if they wanted to submit something in writing, and they did. And that turned out to be kind of handy because it gave me some idea what some potential issues would be. And what we would want to allow and not allow. Because, you know, if you read through his document, there was some stuff that didn't directly relate to vicious dog and could have gotten us way off hand. So I think having a formal written appeal ahead of time should be part of that procedure too. So that we know ahead of time what the issues are going to be and we can figure out, are we going to allow testimony on these issues or not? Because otherwise, and if you looked at that appeal document, that hearing could have gone way off track where there's all this testimony about stuff that doesn't directly relate to the situation with the two dogs. So I think that's another thing we want to make sure we put in there. Brad's going to know a lot of the technical stuff that needs to go in there. But let's open it up. What are some thoughts you guys have as far as procedurally what we should do with vicious dogs? Because we are getting more formal with this. Because we may start to see more of this. And maybe the sheriff has some input too on what he would like to see. Yep.
So, one of the things that I think might be helpful for you, and I guess it would be helpful if Brad was here, but so many of these reports are public record. They should, I mean, literally citizen can come in and get a copy of the report. Even if there's juvenile stuff that we could redact. But one of the things I would offer is that we provide the public safety committee with all the reports that I base it on, so that you know what I'm basing it on. And the other thing to consider is I know there's talk about taking testimony. Oftentimes with these particular cases, they involve neighbors that don't want to get involved. And I understand that completely. We've had cases, not under my administration, but the previous sheriff where the dog owner was viciously attacked and the former sheriff declared the dog vicious. Well, that owner isn't going to come in here and testify to the fact that it's a vicious dog because it's his dog. But I agree completely with the committee that to have a more formalized procedure is great. And to know who the committee would want to hear from ahead of time. If you want to hear directly from the deputies that took the reports, sometimes that can be problematic because sometimes we're basing it on several years worth of reports and deputies might not be here. But I concur completely that to have a more formalized process.
I think definitely having same information you had as far as the reports to base a determination on, because last hearing was referenced, but we didn't really have.
Yeah, I agree. And it seemed odd because
Set a
I'm not
precedent.
the legal mind here, but it seems like I'm testifying a lot of hearsay in the report, but rather than having you actually viewing the
It was
information.
third hand almost through.
Right,
through,
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's right for the sheriff to be presenting the argument to you versus you having the information.
I think we should. More as like the. Like comparing it to a courtroom, you're like the prosecutor. You know, you have a case, the defendant has a case and
Mhm.
we're. Arbitrators. Or
Yeah, but maybe the deputies would be testifying, and I think courtroom is kind of a good similarity to administrative
I would-
law
would-
hearings like
I
this.
would think-
Yeah,
I wouldn't say, yeah, we don't need, or we wouldn't say yes or no, whether you want testimony from the deputies, but if they have a signed sworn statement already. And in us, it's a very recent event,
yeah,
you know, like you say, if it's a 5-year span that builds up to it. Have, even if the deputy is still here that did the initial report. It's
Yeah.
from 5 years ago. I don't know how helpful or, you know, constructive that would be or not. But definitely the reports, right,
Yeah.
you know, any and all information, because, yeah, without it, it's hearsay. We're hearing the neighbors' sworn statements and letters, but I would still entertain taking statement, you know, more
Yeah.
recent statements from neighbors if they want. I consider this very similar to a BOA adjustment hearing or variance.
Yeah.
hearing.
yeah,
And that's really up to the subject of who wants to actually show up. It's all subject to the chair for who's.
yeah. In my conversations with Brad, under these administrative law hearings, there is allowance for hearsay. Because they know not everybody may be able to show up. So, so I do remember that we're in a traditional courtroom, hearsay is typically not admissible. In administrative law hearings, there is room to allow for hearsay. So Brad's more an expert on that,
But
so,
then it's up to us to decide upon if we want to
what
put that
credibility.
hearsay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
But this, whatever this procedure becomes, is this something that would be created in county code, did Brad say?
I believe so, yeah,
So when the public can go to the county code and actually see what,
The process.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
you caught me on the fee. Getting about refundable if they're successful. I like the idea, but I don't like the idea. I like the idea of someone getting their money back if they're not.
Yeah.
Guilty, but at the same time, like Board of Adjustment. It's Board of Adjustment's an $800 fee for a variance.
Yeah.
Or more than that.
yeah, I don't
And they
think
don't,
we,
even if they're granted the variance, they don't get the feedback because there's still staff time involved in preparing it. And there
Yeah.
would obviously be some of your time or department's time in preparing.
yeah, I think we were talking about the next level, if they wanted to appeal our decision, would be in circuit court, and their fee is, I think, around 120. So we were talking
right.
in the range of half that, or maybe $50 as a fee.
Oh.
I
Compared to Board of Adjustment, and I'm just.
Yeah,
seeing
yeah.
A huge fee
And-
discrepancy.
Yeah, and the idea was there to deter a purely frivolous or meritless appeal just because they can. The one other appeal I had was 2 years ago, and we did it in a much less formal way. But that one, the person really didn't have any reason why they were appealing, other than they just didn't like the onerous requirements of a vicious dog, and it was pretty clear that the dog met the definition of a vicious dog. So, you know, if somebody has a genuine appeal where there's merit to it, we don't want to discourage that. But we do want to discourage putting a lot of county resources into a purely, and so the idea is put enough there that if it's a purely frivolous complaint, that it deters them a little bit from filing that.
No,
Maybe not, then,
You know,
but
that's
then it pays for a little bit of our resources that we put
majority
in,
of the people.
yeah,
because if they have to,
Yeah.
if they're faced with complying with the vicious dog ordinance. I don't even know what number to throw out there, but it's gonna cost them so much between
Oh, yeah.
insurance and
Yeah.
muzzles, like physical gear and
And
fencing
the
and all that,
pen, yeah,
everyone would take up field route first, I would think, because it's the cheaper option.
but they know if they lose, then they're gonna have to comply anyway with that, so they're just adding to, yeah.
I-
So that was the idea behind it. If we decide we don't wanna go that route, we can decide that and keep it free. So,
Before
Yeah.
you said a number, I had like 250 or 500
okay,
in my brain for a fee, but
yeah,
Yeah, that's something to
Yeah.
definitely discuss. And you said the huge discrepancy between the other fee is, what you said for variances or
or
what?
for like a county variance. That's non-refundable, whether you win or lose.
And the,
or
and the
the-
whys,
it's-
yeah. Why is that set so high? And then
There's a lot of
these,
staff time involved in preparing and researching it and setting up. Board of Adjustment hearing, they have a court, you have a. Or is called or whatever the, or
Yeah.
reporter,
Yeah.
they make a legal transcript of the
Okay.
hearing. And there's a lot of staff preparation for the reports involved,
yeah, we'd have to compare that then to the
something like
Yeah.
this.
resources required
Something
at
like this,
this
now that
level.
this is videotaped.
yeah. that
Should we
becomes
also,
our record.
should we have, is that our record or should we have a stenographer make a transcript
I
right away?
think we decided the video would be our record, but that may be something that we need to put in the county code.
Yeah,
So,
Or
yeah,
make it mandatory that it's recorded, not that the. Boom is down and. We would proceed with no official record then.
yeah, that would be something we don't want, because whatever decision we make would then be appealable into circuit courts. And they're gonna rely on the record we took, so if we don't have a record, theoretically, if Zoom were down, we would have to postpone the hearing then. So,
But
yeah,
those are things obviously Brad
Yeah.
could give his
yeah,
comments
Yeah.
on too, but
and standardize as much as possible.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep, go ahead.
in the discussions last month too, we also brought up, or somewhere it was discussed, instead of going right to vicious dog, the sheriff gives a ticket for whatever, the dog not running wild or whatever. Is that a possibility, or, that we have the first step, or is that not feasible?
So I think there were a couple different thoughts. One is specifically with the incident last month, the sheriff also had enforcement powers for dogs that are running around unleashed. But then there was also a thought of, should there be a two-tier system for vicious dogs? With a lower tier that didn't have quite as onerous of requirements and maybe didn't have quite as onerous of a legal threshold to meet either. Cause it seemed like if we look at last month as an example, it seemed like there is a problem with that dog, but it maybe didn't rise to the level of vicious dog, where there was some debate as to whether it did or not.
So then my question
Yeah,
actually for the sheriff, is there a statute that was broken, before we get to vicious dog?
Yeah, so typically how it works, we just had a more recent one where it's kind of the same type of thing where the dog is running around the neighborhood. And this particular owner was issued a couple of different citations for dogs at large preceding up to it. What sometimes happens is the final one where the sheriff deems as vicious. The officer might not write a citation and we determine it vicious. We kind of, that is the enforcement action, is deeming it vicious. But usually it's a progressive type of enforcement. Typically it's a, verbal warning to begin with, the dog running at large or animals running at large. And then if that doesn't help, then it's a citation. But just because they're at large doesn't mean they're vicious. I mean, that's kind of two different things. Like
Right.
sometimes they're hand in hand, sometimes they're not.
So with the citation is, what's the fine? And if there's continual violations, does the fine go up?
So I believe the fine for first offense is probably around the $200 area in that. We have had, there's a couple of extreme cases, and I can think of two in the county where we just have chronic problems and the tickets are, this doesn't do a vicious dog at large, where we can increase the bond up to $500, and we've done that before as well, but not very often.
Was it effective?
One case it was, one case it wasn't.
So maybe you want to look through the code and see if there's other things we would want in there, like, is there a fine for an incident where a dog bites somebody? And if not, is that something you would want? You know, are there other enforcement powers you would look for in that code? And maybe that's something we want to look at too, to give you the most tools in your toolkit per se. And not just have the vicious dog, but maybe have a lower tier of, you know, aggressive dog maybe, and then other things you can find for, so you have the broadest array of tools at your disposal. And you're not just limited to dogs running at large or a vicious dog. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, under the current code, I don't believe there's an ordinance violation for just a dog biting. I think that.
Yeah.
It is vicious or not.
Yeah, so, yeah.
I mean, dogs too, is something they're protective also, you
Yep.
know, maybe you think that there's a
Yeah.
reason for that.
They're
but-
territorial and they're
Yeah.
protective of the humans that they see as part of their pack, yeah.
And what the sheriff is, what I have done in the past sheriffs, that's not written anywhere, but we've always kind of used that, that there's a history of occurrences off premise. I don't know if we want to consider that. So typically, my general rule is 2 incidents off property is where I'll consider the vicious part of it. But there's nothing in writing
But
about that.
that's not in writing.
Yeah.
It's just,
It's definitely a situational thing to consider, yeah, where
Yeah.
it occurs.
Karen, how much do we want to put in writing? Because there, you know, so much of the world is gray. There's so many variables.
Well, it's- The definition of vicious will change with different sheriffs, and it will change with different committees that
Yeah.
here, so.
There's actually in the code
There-
a definition and, you know, was bite without provocation.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the reading of that definition will change.
Yeah,
So, yeah, because, during that hearing, I pulled up the code and read the
Yeah.
definition. and,
Yeah,
so did I,
um,
so. Yep,
and that's what kind of stuck me to my end decision.
yep. What
So-
else are we thinking might be helpful when we deal with these vicious dog issues?
Yeah, just more of that, you know, a sworn testimony instead of hearsay and,
Yeah,
you know, maybe put that into policy too, so the public's aware. That how things will be determined.
Yep.
And this is what they need to help their case, because I mean, it truly is a vicious dog case. We want to, you know, help set them up for success and protect the community.
Yeah. Yep.
I would just give direction of Brad, honestly, I would model it. similar to-
Yeah, have it standardized as much as possible.
okay. This may be all we can discuss without Brad here and his technical expertise, so I'm not sure what happened with the schedule that he's not here, but.
With that,
yeah.
I would,
Okay.
if he would be open to it, or if he can get enough information from our discussion here, I would say. So we have a working draft to,
Yeah, and we can look at
kick
that
around,
and, yeah,
that'd be the time to bring it back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sounds, yeah,
sounds
sounds
good.
good.
All right,
Partnership with the sheriff too, yeah.
all right, so I think that's our last agenda item then, so unless anybody has anything else, I'm gonna declare us adjourned.
All right, thank you.
All right.